right, we'll call this meeting to order, starting with a determination of the quorum. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Chair, we have 6 members present, 1 absent. We do have a quorum.
All right, thank you very much. Next, we'll rise for Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Todd, was I right about my understanding of the truth and taxation hearing? We're going to come back to that. That's correct. So an explanation of this agenda as we look at it, the truth and taxation hearing by law cannot take place until 6 p.m. So it's something that we need to come back to. So it's item number 2, and wherever we happen to be in the agenda at 6 o'clock, we'll finish that item up, and we'll come back to this item number 2 at that time. So next we're on to item number 3, the approval of the agenda. I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. And so this brings us then to item number 4, community comments. So this is a time for any members of the community to step forward and address the school board. There is a 3-minute limit per speaker. The board does not take questions at this time, but we'll be happy to respond after the meeting. Are there any community comments at this time?
I'm actually waiting for my husband. He wanted to speak tonight. Do you want me to?
Yeah, please. Yeah, come on. If you wouldn't mind stating your name as well. Or
Ooh, just in time.
There he is. I wish I could step here with him too.
Sure.
Shane Clocanos and Jackie Clocanos.
Where are we at?
You got 3 minutes.
I got 3 minutes. I'll make it quick. We got 3 minutes to address some safety issues at the high school right now. Our daughter is a 10th grader this year. What brought this all to light is right before the Thanksgiving break, she actually came home to us and said that she's afraid to go to school. There are issues going on in hallways. There's issues going on in bathrooms during the school, during school time. There are, in particular, I don't know if you all are aware of this, but there are girls that will not use the bathroom at the Faribault High School the entire day because they're afraid to use the bathrooms. We pulled the calls for service for the last 60 days at the high school. There's 47 calls total. A lot of the calls are calls that you would expect to see at any school. But in particular, there are 8 assault calls. There's another disorderly conduct that gives the impression that it was an assault call. And on multiple occasions, there are multiple officers being assigned to the high school alone. Something has to be done. I'm not there. I can just tell you what's being relayed to us and what our students are telling us. And that's first and foremost. There's another issue with busing that was it came back to light last week. Where we live, from the front door, we fit the criteria for busing, for our daughter to ride the bus.
I believe it's like
2 miles.
2.1 miles our house is from the high school.
But the bus stop is on the northwest side of the school, so that's where the distance gets calculated to. So she's 200 feet too short, so she can't ride the bus. And last Wednesday, Mr. Sesker, I about fell out of my pew when you said that the school district is paying for students to be transported from Minneapolis to Faribault. We weren't asking for anything special for our daughter to ride the bus. The bus already goes there. It's just a matter of getting on the bus when the weather's inclement and we can't provide the transportation for her. If we can't, she's walking 2 miles to school. So busing, the safety issue, if you want particulars, I can give you guys particulars on specific bathrooms and hallways. The there's kids that, our daughter in particular has been marked late for class because she will avoid certain hallways. Because they're being blocked, and if they try to go through, bad things happen. So I think I'm pretty close to my 3 minutes.
Yeah, okay. Well, as I said, the board doesn't respond at the meeting,
Right.
but we will absolutely follow up. We,
Appreciate that.
Todd will make note of your remarks, and particularly if you send an email chain, we'll try to make sure that we follow up with your comments. So thank you
Okay.
for sharing them tonight. We appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and so this brings us to item number 5, recognition and awards. I'm not seeing any tonight, so that brings us then to our consent agenda. Are there any consent agenda items are approved in one motion? They are not open for debate within the consent agenda, but they can be removed by any single board member request. Is there any request for removing items from the consent agenda? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Do we have to do this via roll, Mr. Clerk?
Sure, why not?
Change it. Mr. Clerk, if you please do a roll call on this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yvette,
Aye.
Tom,
Aye.
Chad,
Aye.
Andrea,
Aye.
myself, aye. John's absent. Jason,
Aye.
Mr. Chair, it passes 6-0.
All right, item 7, retirements. There are none this evening. Finance, item A, bank RFP results. Who's
Yep,
doing
and
that?
that's Ellers is gonna come up and present those.
Thank you.
Thank you, Board. I'd like to introduce Ryan Miles from Ellers. As I mentioned at the last school board meeting, we contracted with Ellers to perform a bank request for proposal. The Finance Committee narrowed down the proposals to 2. Since that time, we as a business office staff did have the opportunity to interview both of the banks that were chosen as the top 2. And Ryan is going to present the findings from those interviews. I believe you've got a sheet in front of you that kind of shows a side-by-side comparison.
Thank you, Jennifer. Good evening, board members, superintendent. Ryan Miles again with Ellers Investment Partners. And I also want to recognize Ken Herdman, our president from Ellers Investment Partners, with us as well today. We were contracted back in October to complete the bank RFP to consolidate the banking for the school district in the school district's best interest. It's a service that we provide as an investment advisor. Thank you. Service that we provide for many clients we work with as part of our skills and resources that we can perform for districts and communities that we work with. As Jennifer mentioned, we started with 6 schools, wanted to recognize them briefly, or 6 banks that we interviewed, and through this RFP process: Citizens Community Federal Bank, Wells Fargo, Reliance Bank, Premier Bank, State Bank of Faribault, and First United Bank. And we started with 6. We sent out the RFPs. We narrowed it down through the Finance Committee to 2, and which was Citizens Community Federal and State Bank of Faribault. We interviewed them about 2 weeks ago. I was in attendance with that interview as well, along with the other staff on the finance department. And I wanted to provide a summary of our findings and a recommendation for you all tonight, and answer any questions that you might have. So, on the left-hand side of this summary page, it describes what our RFP was based on, and looking at as a multifaceted approach: $1 million in overall deposits for a general operating account, a payroll of over 650 employees with multiple users signing on throughout the day and having access to all the different ways to move money. So first, we recognize safety and soundness of the banks between the 2, Citizens Community Federal and State Bank of Faribault. Both check the boxes and meet the requirements of safety and soundness, strength and stability of the bank. State Bank of Faribault has, as you know, is headquartered in Faribault here, has a long history, 99-year history in Faribault. It was one of the smaller banks that we interviewed, but it was rated as a 5-star Bauer Bank rating, which is the highest bank rating that you can have as you kind of look at all banks across a single spectrum. Citizens Community Federal Bank, headquartered in Altoona, has had a branch location here in Faribault for about 10 years. Out of the Walmart location, and it's a publicly owned company, different than a privately held bank, State Bank of Faribault. $20 million of assets of this bank are held locally here in the community, about $1 billion in size of the bank. Again, a 5-star rating, so both of them on safety and soundness for deposits for the district, check both of those requirements. Comprehensiveness of bank services provided. Throughout the interview process, both banks were able to meet all those requirements. Staff availability, local resources, be able to process payroll, provide fraud protection, online banking resources. They were able to fully demonstrate that to us with their online banking demonstration 2 weeks ago. The assigned management team, we met with 3 colleagues from each location came out, and they have a local presence within both locations and both able to perform up to the standards that we're looking for with the district. This is where there was some changes or some differences, and I wanted to highlight this, the charges for the services and the value that each of these banks can provide monetarily, which was one of the reasons that we looked at this, who could provide some of the greatest value for the district. Overall, Citizens Community said we will go on record, and we have that they will waive all bank fees for the 3-year contract that they're looking for. 0 monthly fees, and they will provide the check scanners, free risk assessments, and then provide a minimum interest rate of a floor for 3 years of 1.25%. If you calculate all that value up over 3 years' time, that's a minimum interest of about $36,000 the district could earn over those 3 years' time. They also have set their interest rate tied to the MAGIC fund, which is a district LGIP fund, that if that rate continues to rise in a rising rate environment, that rate that the district earns will rise along with it. So this is essentially the worst that you could do, an overall monetary return for the district is about $36,000 with the bank services, totally free. State Bank of Faribault, they also were able to waive some services charges, but they have hard charges that cannot be waived at all. And that is their payroll processing, the remote deposit, and online access for staff here. And that comes to about $267 a month that cannot be waived by any way. And so their other charges were able to be offset by some of their earnings credits. But what that means to the district is over a 3-year contract period, it would cost the district in bank fees about $10,000. So the difference between the two is $45,000 over a 3-year contract. And I thought that was worth noting, that the largest value for charges for the district would be Citizens Community Federal. Service enhancements, we went into the details of what additional things can the banks provide. Citizens Community can provide ACH blocking and filtering, which is the latest and greatest in bank fraud, fraud prevention technology. State Bank at Faribault this time does not offer that, and they also don't offer the ability to log in at one online website. So Citizens Community has some new technology, one place to log in, and you can access all of your banking needs in one spot for the staff versus using multiple different websites to log in to do the banking. Public sector service experience, both banks said that they had public sector experience. However, First State Bank did not provide any references for us to confirm that. We were told that they do work within different public entities, but didn't provide references. Citizens Community Federal did provide some references that we were able to follow up on, and provided a favorable reference. A few other factors to note, Citizens Community Federal is opening a new branch, a standalone branch, and they're no longer going to be in the Walmart. Opening up here very soon in January, in addition to adding some new staff. So they are very invested in the community, looking to grow and deepen that relationship. Obviously they're a newer bank to town, but they're not going anywhere. That's their commitment to the community, is to bring a new branch into the community as well. So as we stacked all these things up, there's nuance, there's pricing, there's, community involvement, all those different things. But judging on the merits of the RFP that we were provided to do, it's our recommendation to bring forward to the board tonight that we would recommend CCF Bank to engage banking services with. And for that, I open up questions.
Ryan, can I ask, what is the assumed balance for the account?
$965,000.
In our finance committee meeting, though, I thought you had said that balance likely goes lower as you hope to keep more in that MISLAF fund or something. Is that accurate or am I wrong on that?
No, you are correct.
Yep.
That we do want, so we provided historical data. And so all of these numbers are based on historical data. Certainly as we compare interest rates, we can get a better rate of interest at MISLAF. So our hope and goal, not a strategy, our goal is that we will keep our balance at whatever local bank is chosen, still healthy enough that we don't have to worry about any unforeseen circumstances. But I don't anticipate that it will be that $900,000.
Good, thank you.
Currently, these services are being provided by Wells Fargo, is that
So
correct?
currently we're split up. We have our main checking account at Wells Fargo. We have our payroll account, which is primarily an in and out for direct deposit at State Bank of Faribault. And we also have our two student activity accounts at State Bank of Faribault. But we are going to be consolidating, we're going to be taking all of the accounts to whichever bank is chosen. And that was part of and understood in the RFP.
And so one of these costs or interests earned, I was trying to decide how those compared to what the numbers would be right now.
Excuse me, right now, the state payroll is at State Bank of Faribault. So these costs are currently being incurred. The payroll costs are, not the remote deposit or but a good chunk of those costs are currently being incurred, to answer your question.
And there's no interest coming from Wells Fargo in that?
We do get interest from Wells Fargo, but they also have fairly substantial fees. They were part of the results of the RFP, but the Finance Committee made the decision not to move them forward as a finalist.
Question, when we do something like this, we want to be local. That's why I brought up Reliance Bank, because there's just only one of them local. Instead of somewhat out of Wisconsin, don't know a history, never heard of them before. Why is that? Why not get somebody, that's what we're doing. Maybe get local contractors, local banks, and now we're talking a corporation based out of Wisconsin.
Right, well, to answer your question, that was outside the scope of the RFP. I mean, the RFP was to review banking services and seek proposals from banks who maintain an office within a reasonable distance from the district office. So that finding a bank with a bank branch, and I would submit that CCF has $20 million on deposit, looking to add a larger branch in the community, employing people that are in the community, doing loans for people in the community. Talking to that bank, they've agreed to keep the funds on deposit here recognized in the local community. So the funds that are held in the district will be held here locally as well.
So Richard, I'll just say State Bank of Faribault is locally owned.
Right.
Right, yep. So they are locally owned, and I will, full disclosure, I will be abstaining from the vote. I'm on the board of directors at Reliance Bank, so I will remove myself from the equation. But I will just add that I think as other members vote, there's a trade-off, right? You can see that CCF Bank is obviously, from a financial only standpoint, the best scenario, and that's why Ehlers recommended it based on their RFP, and they did what they were asked to do. And yet there's a real life everyday situation or scenario as the balance of what does a locally owned bank help provide in our community for our school district and in the things that they oftentimes support. And you look, I don't know if everybody saw the article or didn't see the article, in Owatonna, and the investment and the commitment that 3 entities in Owatonna are willing to make towards a new high school, but Federated Insurance stepped up to the plate and said, we'll commit $20 million. Viricon down there said, we will do all your glass at cost. And Wenger said, well, we're involved in some form or fashion as well. And so, obviously, that's the balancing act. These folks were not tasked with the balancing act because you can't put a price tag on what that community involvement is. So I just wanted to, we had this discussion, and a great discussion at our finance committee meeting. So I just want to let you know I'm abstaining from this, and you 5 made your decision.
Ryan, could you speak to what banks are required to do as far as donating, and maybe donating is not the correct word, but.
Yeah, each bank actually, it's called CRA, Community Reinvestment Act. That each bank is pegged on a different size range of what they're required to do and give and be involved in the community. So banks with a larger bank obviously has to be involved more dollar-wise, more hours per employee, that sort of thing, and being engaged to help that local community. So it's something that's monitored and regulated for all these banks, and some banks meet the minimum requirements and some go above and beyond. And I can't speak to either one of these doing that, but they both meet the minimum requirements of that community reinvestment. So.
Mr. Chair, I would just comment that we did review several other local banks at the Finance Committee. We did review Reliance and First United, the RFP that they brought forward, but the benefit was significantly less than State Bank. That's why we chose State Bank to review with the board as a whole.
Other comments? You're looking for an action tonight, right? So this means that the chair will at some point have to entertain a motion to approve one of these banks. I think we're free to choose either one, right?
I would like to offer an amendment
Please do.
that we
Actually,
add.
there's no
Point of
motion.
we need
Hold
a
on,
chair.
There's no motion, so there's,
Oh, okay.
whenever there is no motion, thus there's nothing to amend. So
Okay.
you could offer a motion if you would like, but there is no amendment to be offered at this point.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to approve the Citizens Community Federal Bank as our bank for school district as presented by Ehlers tonight.
Okay. We have a motion to approve Citizens Community Federal Bank. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
We have a second. All right, is there further discussion?
I'd like to offer an amendment
Please do.
that we add to the list Reliance Bank, be the
So-
local, that,
So hold on, so the motion is to approve Citizens Community Federal Bank. So I think the amendment would be to replace community, I'm just trying to.
right, yeah, that would be.
To go with
right.
what you're suggesting, the amendment would be to replace
Replace.
Citizens Community Federal Bank with Reliance.
That is correct, sir.
So there's a motion to replace Citizens Community Bank with Federal Bank with Reliance. Is there a second to that motion for an amendment? Motion for amendment fails due to a lack of a second. So we're back to the original motion that has been seconded for Citizens Community Federal Bank, but we are open still for a discussion. Are there thoughts or?
Again, I state that, CCF is based out of Wisconsin, that we should be talking local. And the State Bank is local, and Reliance is, there's only one of them. Even though I bank at Premier, but they've got them all over the place, so it's not really, they're in the state, but they're not located within our city. And I thought that was the directive from the board, no matter what we do, is keep it local, but I guess somebody didn't listen.
Richard, obviously I was at the finance committee meeting, and so I appreciate the local, but I just want to defend our Jennifer and administration. When they went out for local, I think they went out for local branches, right? And so I think maybe there's a difference in your definition and happened of what is really local maybe, but it was definitely all of the banks that participate in this do have a local branch, do employ at least one person or two people or three people type of thing. So I don't want it to come across that it was done improperly. I do hear what you're saying of local ownership and local commitment, but I just want to state that once again. I'm abstaining, but I just want to reiterate that that was my recollection.
And I can just, overall, I'll read the RFPs that were presented to the Finance Committee. Were from Citizens Community Federal, Wells Fargo Bank, Premier Bank, State Bank of Faribault, Reliance Bank, and First United Bank. So we did review all of those at the Finance Committee.
Is there further comment on this item? All right, hearing none, Mr. Clerk, would you please do a roll call on the motion?
Sure. That'd be number what, 8A?
8A, yep.
Yvette?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
Chad? Andrea?
Aye.
Myself, no. Jason?
Aye. Mr. Clerk, I think you should call Chad.
Oh,
He'll say abstain.
oh,
as the-
Chad.
Abstain.
Okay. It passes 4-1, one abstention.
All right, thank you all.
And thank you guys,
Yes,
thank you to
thank you
Ellers for
for-
all your work and Jennifer for setting that up, so
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Yeah, taking that extra effort after the Finance Committee. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is it? Okay, we've got gift and donations.
We can get that.
in 3 minutes. So there should be a, all right, so we'll do one more quick item before we go back to item 2. Item 8B3, gifts and, there is no enrollment report tonight, there is no financial report tonight. So we're on to 8B3, gifts and donations, resolution 1838, the acceptance of gifts and donations. There is one donation for us to approve tonight. I apologize if I screw up this name. Mohani Singh in the amount of $25. Donation through Donors Choose for ECFE Messy Art Project. I'll entertain a motion to approve this.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve resolution 1838. Is there any discussion on this item? As always, we're always appreciative of donations. Sometimes they're large and sometimes they're small, but all of them are appreciated, and so we thank this donor for this item. So with that, Mr. Clerk, would you please do the roll?
Yvette?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
Chad?
Aye.
Andrea?
Aye.
Myself, aye. Jason?
Aye.
Mr. Chair, it passes 6-0.
Okay, and with that, still 5:58. That clock says 6:01, so we're gonna go with that clock for the moment. And Jennifer, if you wanna come up and we'll start with the truth and taxation. By the time you get up here, it'll be 6 o'clock on all my clocks. And we'll do the truth and taxation hearing.
No, I usually like standing. I can't decide here. Oh, since I can see it now.
You- And just remember, in order for the audience to hear it, you have to have the. mic.
Okay, well then I'll sit it. I'm pretty loud though.
I know you.
All right. So this is a required hearing by the state of Minnesota for truth and taxation for our 2018 pay 2019 property tax levy. There are 2 requirements for this hearing, to discuss the district budget and then to discuss the 2018 pay 19 property tax. And as a reminder that 2018 pay 2019, what that means is it is certified in calendar year 2018. The taxes are then paid by citizens in the calendar year 2019, and the district will recognize it as revenue in the 1920 school year. So we're going to start with the general fund budget. Just a brief overview. This is our preliminary budget that was presented and approved back at the June meeting. But just some general facts about it. As you can see from this pie chart, we get the vast majority of our revenue from state sources, about 11% from local property taxes, 5% from federal sources, and then just a few other things to make up the final 3%. Not all, but almost all of our revenue is in some way, shape, or form based on our enrollment. About 50% of the funds that we get from state sources are a result of the basic education formula. And I just wanted to show this slide really just as a factual information that the general ed formula has not kept pace with inflation since 2003. If it had, the formula amount would be about $6,900 per pupil unit now, as opposed to $6,300. So this is why so many districts have trouble keeping up financially, is that the funding has not kept pace with what our expenditures have been. Our expenditure budget, the vast majority in Faribault, as is true in other districts, goes to wages and benefits. Our human resources are the most valuable capital that a school district has. And so that's where most of our funding goes. Then the next biggest is purchase services. So that's everything from transportation, utilities, any variety of purchase services. Small amount goes to supplies, capital expenditures, debt service, and other. Oh, one thing I meant to say earlier. You will see in my presentations, I will always have pictures of things going on in our schools. It's really easy, especially as a finance director, to get really caught up in dollars and cents. It's important for me, and I think for everyone, as we talk about school budgets, to remember that every dollar has an impact on the students that we serve. And a lot of great things are happening in Faribault schools. Even though money is always tight, it doesn't prevent us from really offering some outstanding opportunities for our students. And here you can see our students are often, giving back to our community. So our fund balance policy in Faribault is that the unassigned general fund balance should be no less than 9.5% of all general fund expenditures. For FY18, last year's budget, we were projecting a 14.45% fund balance. The actual amount was 14.26 after our audit. Prior to the audit, we anticipated that the current year, our fund balance would end at 12.42%. Based on the actual results from FY18, we are now projecting a 12.39% 18-19 fund balance. The plan in the business office is that we will presenting a revised budget here in the next month or two so that we can have an even more accurate picture of where we will end this year. In addition to the general fund, and I'm not really going to spend much time here, this is right out of our 18-19 preliminary budget book. We do have several other funds. We have the food service fund, which is where all the expenditures around our food service occur. Our community service fund, which is community education, early childhood family education, school readiness, and adult basic education. And then our debt service fund, which is the fund in which we pay our principal and interest for our outstanding bonds.
Jennifer, why did that debt service fund go up by $1.4 million?
Well,
Am I looking at that right on the bottom?
yes, so we had that doesn't get closer. So this was
Or is it a timing thing?
I believe it was a timing thing because we had capitalized some interest. I will look into that, Chad, and get you an exact answer for that. I'll get back to all of you on that. Okay, so now we've fulfilled our requirement to talk about the budgets. Now I will go into talking about our levy. And there are three parts to the levy: the general fund, the community service fund, and the debt service fund. In your packet, I did do a revised side-by-side comparison from last year's levy to this year's levy, and I believe I put some copies out on the tables. So you can really refer to that for very specific dollar numbers as I go through here. So with the general fund, some of the levy is spread out over what's called referendum market value. This calculation, all properties with the exception of recreational and ag land are valued equally. It's just a dollar for dollar value. And the things spread out over the referendum market value are the local optional revenue, which is $424 per pupil unit, our voter approved levy, our board approved levy, equity revenue, which is a way of equalizing us with other districts in the state, and then transition revenue, which is an amount from several years ago when they redid the formula, and this transition revenue is slowly phasing out. Please note that the referendum market value for our district has increased by 4.7%. So that's a larger number over which to spread this levy. The subtotal for this amount you can see is a little over 3.9 million. There are prior year adjustments that happen, and that was about 79,000. So the total for the levies distributed on referendum market value are 3.859 million. Then we have levies distributed over net tax capacity. Net tax capacity puts some values on different types of property. So a commercial property is taxed at a little bit higher rate than a residential property is. That net tax capacity has increased in our district by 4.2%. So an increase that we have as a district is spread out over a larger tax base. I won't go through these line by line. You can see them up here, and they were also on your sheet. But these levies totaled a little over 2.2 million. There were some adjustments that added actually $40,000. So the total of this portion of the general fund levy is 2.254 million. And then the next portion, the second of the three parts, is the community service fund. Almost all of this is generated by our population. The gen ed, or the general community ed, is by our total district population. Early childhood family education and home visiting are generated by our population of 0 to 5-year-olds. And then our adults with the disabilities and school age care are dollar amounts that we anticipate providing services to persons with disabilities increases the cost of those services. So the total for the community service fund portion of the levy is $356,254. And finally, we have the debt service fund. It's a pretty simple calculation. It is 105% of the payments that we will make for principal and interest in fiscal year 20. They do make adjustments every year as we are levying 5% more than we actually need, and that builds up over time. They every year do what usually ends up being a negative adjustment, and this is pretty much the type of adjustment that we see most years in this fund. So the total debt service fund levy is $1,845,962. So here you see the comparison from last year's levy to this year's levy. It is in total a 6.56% increase. Just a reminder that, again, that is spread out now over a larger tax base. So although I have not seen anyone's actual estimated property tax, there's two things individuals need to look at. Did their property value change? Because then their share will automatically increase. And then, you know, the district portion they will see. So what I would ask the board is to approve this levy. We do have to approve it at the exact dollar amount.
Jennifer, just a couple quick questions. So this increase here, is some of this increase, how do I want to phrase this? Is this realized extra revenue?
Yes.
Or is this offsetting a reduction in state revenue?
This is actual revenue aside from the state revenue, if I'm understanding your question correctly.
Well, I mean, I know in some of these things what local taxpayers pay and levy is offset by state funding at times.
Well, there are some, and forgive me if I'm still not totally understanding your question, there are some levies that have corresponding state aids.
Right.
So if you under levy in those areas, you would also lose the state aid for those amounts. Operating capital, long-term facilities maintenance, not staff development. Operating capital and long-term facilities maintenance are the two that come to my mind off the top of my head, where there are state aids in conjunction with the local levies that make up the total revenue for those amounts.
Yeah, so maybe I can help, like equity, I know that a portion of that is based on state aid and a portion of it is local levy. And as the property taxes increase, then the amount of local levy also will increase and the amount of state aid will actually shrink. So I think that's kind of what you're getting at, Jason. There's about 4 or 5 different categories, including our operating levy, where we don't get, I mean, a number of years ago, we used to get 35% from the state.
Mm-hmm.
And that has steadily decreased throughout the years, and now I think we're down to maybe 9 or 10%. And each year that decreases too.
Well, this is what I'm wondering, because otherwise I'm not sure why the levy would be increasing. We didn't approve an increase, the voters didn't approve an increase, but the levy is increasing.
Well, because there's some things that happen just by formula. For instance,
Right.
our operating referendum, when the voters approved it, they approved an inflationary increase every year.
Right.
So that is an increase that happens.
Mm-hmm. So that one I understand, but
Okay.
none of the others do I quite understand. And that is not 6%, that I know. So I'm
Right.
trying to make sure I understand.
Well, some of it too,
I mean,
if you
the general
look,
fund is going up by 8%, and that's way over inflation, and so I'm trying to figure out why the general fund levy is going up by 8% when there was, I'm not sure what would cause that to go up by 8%.
so if you look also, we did have some relatively large adjustments from prior years, and this is on the side-by-side comparison from one year to the next. So for instance, we had a voter-approved referendum adjustment from prior years of almost $122,000. We had a board-approved referendum adjustment of $49,000. We had an equity adjustment of $41,000. So they always go back to prior years, and then they have actual enrollments and other information. Some of these are, next year's numbers are based on some estimates. And then as time goes on and those estimates are quantified and are no longer estimates, then they make adjustments to prior year levies.
All right, so let me see if I can repeat that back to you. So what I'm understanding, and I see these numbers now, these side-by-side numbers, what you're saying is, in a given year, we levy for what we think the number of students is gonna be. The next year, we make a correction to that,
Yeah, the
right?
state makes a correction.
When we know what
based
the
on
numbers were,
actual.
there's a correction there, and so a couple of corrections from year to years can make the levy seem to go up or
Right.
down in an unusual way that
Exactly.
doesn't reflect what the funding should have been, because we're we're always operating on estimates in some fashion.
Exactly.
All right, that's helpful to me, thank you.
And unfortunately, you guys don't have much control of how the formulas work from the Department of Education, so.
Right.
Most of these were just done, they would have been done whether I was sitting here or Jennifer was sitting there, quite frankly.
How much control do we have over this as a district?
Well, we do have the option to under-levy. We have control in that we do set the local optional revenue, which we are now maximizing at $424 per pupil. The board did just approve renewing the board-approved portion of our operating referendum. That is something that the board controls. The only other things that, on the top of my head, that the board would control is if you would decide to under-levy, that you just say, no, we don't want to take all of this. There are, as I said, ramifications for that, in that you then not only lose these funds, but you would also lose some state aid.
Jennifer, the market value, the district's referendum market value, bless you, as that goes up, that's a good thing for us?
That's a really good thing for us, because we are levying an exact dollar amount, and it's spread out over these values. So as those values rise, the amount per, $100,000 of home or business goes down.
So, in essence, the addition of the Faribault Foods facility, as Daikin gets up and going and that place becomes more valuable, as their tax goes up, everybody else's, in theory, goes down because they're consuming more of it.
Because we're levying an exact dollar amount.
Okay, thank you.
And it's spread out over now more people,
Okay.
or more entities.
So
School Finance 101.
So just to come back to your point, now that you've helped me clarify that, I'm looking at these numbers, those adjustments account for the vast majority
They do.
of
They
this
account
big difference that
for-
we're seeing
right.
about. So that's, and that understanding of correcting for previous years when you had estimates, and once you know the real numbers, you make those corrections.
And sometimes, as you can
those are
see,
different in
for
the year, too.
instance, in last year's levy, about 4 lines down under the spread out over referendum market value, we had a large negative adjustment on the referendum.
Right.
And this year, we still had a negative adjustment, but it wasn't near as big.
Right.
So that raises this year's levy.
Exactly, right. That's helpful, thank you very much. So
How does it compare with the city and county? Because basically we have to pay more taxes because of this, right? As compared to zero?
So, as a whole taxing district, we are levying more next year. We would be, if we approve this, than we did this year.
So are you looking for a motion?
So, yeah, we
From
need
us,
a
or-
motion to approve the 2018 pay 2019 property tax levy for the amount of, let me go back, whoops. Bring up my, hold on, I'll get to it.
Drew, you wanna pop that up then again?
Is
Yes,
it the 8 million?
It's right, right up there. Jennifer.
Does the motion need to include that exact number?
It
Yeah.
needs to include that exact number, yes.
All right, I'll take a swing at it. I'll move for approval that the Faribault Public Schools levy the amount of $8,316,264.24. We're good with that?
Perfect.
is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Third.
Is there any further discussion?
Is there public comment at this time from, or not?
It's a good question. I don't know.
During truth and taxation, there should be.
I think there is,
Yeah,
so
I
why
think
don't we
that's,
ask? Thank
Yep.
so if there's anybody.
you, Mr. Clerk,
Okay,
for
yeah,
pointing that
just-
out, appreciate that.
I'd like to comment on the previous slide that was just up and then one that came earlier. We do receive most of our funding from state sources. But the chart that you showed, that state funding had not kept up with inflation for 15 years. And while I am not pleased with the idea of increasing local taxes. I understand the necessity of that if we are to continue to offer as good a programming, as good of educational experience, as good as staff and so on as possible. And so while it is regrettable to need to raise the, I won't have the right term, the overall, the dollar amount. It is not because of choices that this board has made. It is a result of a legislative failure to even fund based on inflation, not to mention some of the evolving challenges that we face due to demographics and technology. So I'm in support of this, but regretfully so, I wish the state legislature would do its job more fully.
So with that, I'm going to ask if there's any community comment at this time. Give it a patient pause before we move on. Hearing none, we do have a motion, if I'm correct, and a second to that motion. Is there any further comment?
Again, I'll be voting no on this, and we are a poor community. I think we're getting poorer, and now we're raising taxes. And it's a point where we have to stop. I know the state doesn't keep up, but that's, I think I tried for 12 years as a delegate to change some of that, and it's like butting your head against the wall. So it's, you know, good luck with any new members on that. So, but again, there's a point where we just have to stop raising taxes, keep on raising taxes. It's gonna break us. It's gonna break us.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. I'll just point out that in some previous years, taxes have in fact for this district gone down at times for the exact same reasons that they're going up this year, which is that from year to year there are variations in what our estimates are compared to what the actual numbers of students are, and that this number going up represents any zero change in commitment from the school district in terms of what we are providing per student. And so it does not reflect any decision on this board's part to begin raising taxes at some large level ad infinitum, but simply a variation from year to year. And if you look back, there are some years where in fact that has benefited us and it's gone down. So I think that's important to comment on, and not simply a decision to just continuously raise taxes by large amounts. And that's why I wanted to ask earlier to make sure I understood where this increase came from, because it was a surprisingly large increase this year, but I'm not going to change the commitment I had per student this year or any previous year that we've had. So,
Mr. Chair, may I add too,
yes,
just so for Mr. Olson's sake, and it's kudos to you too. Over the 8 years that I've been here, you guys have reduced the taxes in this district per year by almost $1 million. So you actually have, even with this increase, over the years, a net amount of nearly $1 million that you have decreased the taxes here in this district. So you have done a good job with that.
all right, we have a motion in a second. Is there any further comment? Hearing none, Mr. Clerk, would you please do a roll call on this?
Okay. Yvette.
Aye.
Tom.
Aye.
Chad.
Aye.
Andrea.
Aye.
Myself, no. Jason.
Aye.
Mr. Chair, it passes 5-1.
All right, thank you, Mr. Clerk. And thank you, Jennifer.
Thanks, Jennifer.
All right, and so this brings us to item number 9, other committee reports. No report from the District Advisory Committee this evening, no report on technology. from the insurance company, or insurance committee, Nicole.
Good evening. So we had our initial insurance committee meeting of the year in November. A couple things that we talked about at that meeting was, of course, reviewing our utilization thus far in the year. We're running a little higher than we would like to be so far, but what our consultant reminded us of is that we're still very early in the year to really kind of make any decisions or indications on where we'll end up. He said that we do have a lot more time to kind of regroup and get back on track. So we're riding that out for a little while yet. The biggest thing that we talked about is this next coming up year will be a hit a year for us. So that means that we'll be going out for bid for our insurance for the next 2 years. It's kind of exciting for us because we're looking at doing some things a little differently with our plans in hopes to try and get some better rates from the companies here. So during that meeting, we established a timeline, and our plan is to have our bids all open and back and reviewed in early February, so that in April we'll be able to bring a recommendation to the school board for our plans for the 19-21 years. And that was about it. I'm not sure, do you have anything else you'd like to add, Chad?
Great job.
All right, thank you. Any questions?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, next up we have 2 reports, both from Anne Marie, so for wellness and
She went home sick, sorry, she was ill.
So is somebody gonna cover that, or are we moving
I
on?
don't,
She's gonna report in January.
yep, she'll double up,
Got it.
that's right, sorry, I forgot about
We're
that.
excited to hear the January report. All right, so.
Mr. Chair, I will add there's going to be a district-wide wellness challenge to accumulate steps, and the board is invited to be involved in that challenge if you see the emails.
All right, thank you. Can we build a robot to do my steps? Sorry.
They'd fight over if it counts for the high school or the district office, so I don't know.
All right. This brings us to special services, for which there's no report this evening. Facility committee, there's no report. Policy committee, you have minutes in front of you, and we have some policies we're looking at for first reading and some policies for second reading, meaning we're looking for action on those. Mr. Superintendent or anybody else, is there some comment on these policies?
Yeah, they are all required policies from MSBA, and for the most part, they are just changing the terminology so they match the statute.
Are we discussing the policy, particularly 601, that is being asked to be approved tonight? Are questions appropriate there, or are the ones just for the ones?
Why don't we, for the moment, stick on item H9, H2,
Okay.
with the first reading policies, and
Right.
then we'll go to that next.
Okay.
So this evening for first reading, and for those who are not familiar with the process, policies adopted by the board need to come before the board 2 times before they can be adopted. So they've come to us first as a first reading, at which time we can discuss them and think if there should be any changes to them. And then they come back to the board for a second time, and at that time they can be approved. And so the policies tonight that are here simply for our first reading are policy 603, curriculum development, policy 615, testing accommodations, modifications, and exemptions for IEPs, section 504 plans and LEP students, policy 616, school district system accountability, policy 618, assessment of student achievement, and policy 620, credit for learning. Are there any comments or questions on those policies? Okay. These policies are in front of us this evening, just for a first reading, and so they will come back to us presumably in January, at which time we will be looking at them for approval. So then we'll move on to item 9H3. I'll begin by reading what these policies are, and then we will plan to have discussion and then take action on these policies. So The policies are Policy 413A, Harassment and Violence, Parent and Coaches Policy. Policy 601, School District Curriculum and Instruction Goals. Policy 604, Instructional Curriculum. Policy 613, Graduation Requirements. Policy 614, School District Testing Plan and Procedure. Policy 619, Staff Development for Standards. And Policy 802, Disposition of Obsolete Equipment and Material. So those are the ones being looked at this evening for approval. And with that, I'll invite any comments on any of these policies.
Well, I apologize for not bringing this up when this policy 601 was read for the first time. I'm afraid, due to some personal situations, I haven't been quite as attentive as I would have hoped to have been. I'm concerned about school district curriculum and instructional goals. Mr. Sesker, you said a few moments ago that this is coming from MSBA. Is that correct?
That's correct. The boiler policy, yep.
And they're trying to keep us in line with state law and Department of Ed regulations.
Yep.
Does that apply to terminology? My concern is under item 4A that we have a long-term strategic plan, which this board has worked on from time to time during my tenure on the board. And that is and I trust will be continued to be worked on. But we're using the words world's best workforce. Is that part of the requirement?
That's the legal documentation required by the Minnesota Department of Education.
So we need to use that verbiage here.
Yeah.
Well, then I'll simply raise the point is that I think there's something diminished when we concentrate on the world's best workforce as opposed to the world's best citizens. And that brings me to my second comment under 4B1. All students will be required to demonstrate essential skills to effectively participate in lifelong learning. The A, B, C, D, E, and F, I don't have any problems with what's there. What I do have a problem with is what's not there. Having been a social studies teacher for some 44 years, and considering the situation in our country today, it would seem to me that we would want to emphasize knowledge of government, law, the Constitution, and civic responsibilities. Now, I do see the words global and cultural understanding, but that seems to be different. We do have mathematical and scientific concepts. It would seem to me that we ought to have economic, governmental, and civic responsibility concepts as well if we are truly going to be educating students for lifelong learning. And so that the lack of that emphasis, I don't know who created this document. Had I been more on top of my life at the time, I would have suggested this at the at the session which this was brought for first reading. But that seems to be a definite lack in this particular policy.
Yeah, just to kind of give you the idea behind policy is certainly to protect the district. Anything that you have talked about or the school board talks about can be something that you can certainly mandate within our current procedures that you guys require of us. So those things can always be put into those procedures so that it's required part of our local curriculum.
Okay.
So globally, this just, it's protection. And then I think, Andre, you had a point too.
Yeah, Tom, if you look down under 2A, I think that you'll see some of what you're asking for is in there maybe. And then there's even further down, it talks about just who the child that we're trying to grow within, personally even. So I think that the policy covers more than maybe what you're wanting.
What gets written gets acted upon. And so
Right.
the lack of that specifically, although I do recognize your point about 2A. Having heard some building goals over the last month and a half or so, and having most of the schools put in those goals as increasing MCA scores, there is no MCA test in social studies or civics or government. And so, having spent most of my professional career making the case and working on the idea that words matter, I find the lack here of more specificity to be a little disturbing, although I recognize what you're saying, Todd, but we're acting on this as a board, and I wish there were better words here. So that's my point. I thank the board for 8 years of allowing me to ramble on.
So just to clarify, Mr. Casper can make recommendations and send this one back to the policy committee?
He
And then
can.
the policy committee would act or have to be, this would have to be voted down, this exact one, for it to go back to the policy committee? Is that the proper procedure or what?
I don't think there's a motion to it yet.
No, if there was, I'm sorry.
If there was.
If there was as it sits.
Yeah, yep. So you can ask us to take it back and take a look at it and review it and see what the curriculum director, Ryan, says about that and get some feedback from them. And I think the piece would be, the caution is, do you want it in policy or do you want it in procedures? Procedures are a lot more flexible than policies. So once you get it in policy, it's there for good. But you can request that to be sent back to the policy committee, and we can certainly review it again. We have no problem with that. We do that all the time.
Well, when I first came on the board, we did not have a curriculum committee. Now, I've participated in that committee since its creation, and this year it has been modified to the district, or at least name-wise, the District Advisory Committee. Since the curriculum that the district attempts to deliver is where policy meets the student, it is my hope that the District Advisory Committee might participate in the development of these documents, or at least the approval of these documents in the future, since what we say in these policies is what we're standing for. And as a district, I'm uncomfortable with the world's best workforce terminology. I'm uncomfortable with the emphasis on standardized testing, which I've talked about a number of times. And I am uncomfortable with the lack of specificity in citizenship, civics, American civil rights sort of thing. We have a lot of turmoil in our country right now, and I think it's more and more important that we raise educated citizens.
Mr. Casper, I'm going to ask you to look at one more thing. If you have it in front of you, if you look at policy 604, which I was just browsing through, it's 2A3. As it lists the items that must be provided in the following subject areas. I'll read 2A3 to you while you're looking for it here.
604?
Yes, 604-1. So yeah, 2A3, so this is the instruction, general statement of policy. Instruction must be provided in at least the following subject areas. There are a number of them listed here, but one is social studies, including history, geography, economics, government, and citizenship that includes civics. And again, I don't know if that covers precisely what you were talking about, but it certainly seemed related as I was looking at it. And so I wanted to point that out.
I don't question that at all. My concern was that in talking about school district curriculum and instruction goals, it was not specific in that policy. I do, you're absolutely correct in that 604-2A does seem to address my concerns, but I guess I want to be as clear as possible what our district priorities are.
I'll make a motion to approve all as is.
Okay. So we currently have a motion to approve all the policies that were previously listed. As is there a second to that? I'll read them off if there's a second to that motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second, and so I'll read again what that motion and second is for. The motion and second would be to approve policy 413A, harassment and violence, parents and coaches policy. Policy 601, school district curriculum and instruction goals. Policy 604, instructional curriculum. Policy 613, graduation requirements. Policy 614, school district testing plan and procedure. Policy 619, staff development for standards. Policy 802, disposition of obsolete equipment and material. Is there further discussion on this motion?
I'd like to just make one statement. I will vote for approval here, in part because of the clarification that you brought forward. But it is my hope that as the board goes forward, that someone will try and carry on the fight for specificity.
Thank you, Mr. Casper. Are there any further comments before the vote? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you all. This brings us to other matters. Item 10A, consider approval of resolution 1837 establishing combined polling places for multiple precincts and designating hours during which polling places will remain open for voting for school district elections not held on the day of a statewide election. That is a long resolution.
So moved.
Eloquently worded. We have a motion, is there a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Superintendent Sesker, do you just want to say a little bit about what this resolution is for?
Yeah, just on the elections where we have our own independent elections, we have to, by resolution, let people know where those polling places will be. We're actually going to do this at the organizational meeting every year. We'll put it on here. It'll be for the following year. That'll be for 2020. To make it a little bit more smooth and transparent, we'll do it at every organizational meeting from now on rather than waiting till December for the next year.
So we'll be voting again in January on
Yeah,
this.
for the following year, not the current year. Yep. Yep, that's required by law.
So to clarify, at this moment, we're not calling for an elections, we're sort of
Just telling us where the polling
keeping the
places are.
option open,
Yep,
right?
yep,
If an election were called for, here's where you would vote.
right.
That's what this resolution is stating at this time. We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, Mr. Clerk, would you please read the roll?
Yes, Yvette,
Aye.
Tom,
Aye.
Chad,
Aye.
Andrea,
Aye.
myself, I, Jason.
Aye.
Mr. Chair, it passes 6-0.
All right, thank you all. Item 10B, consider approval of agreement between ISD 656 and IUOE, locals number 70 for paraprofessionals. So this is their contract negotiation with the paraprofessionals in the district. Jennifer and Nicole, if you guys would be willing to come forward for a little bit in case there's any questions. I'll start with entertaining a motion to approve.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Then we'll have some discussion on this item. You want to run through it real briefly for us, what the highlights are?
Sure, absolutely. So just to start out, Jennifer and I had several meetings with our paraprofessional union stewards and their business rep from St. Paul. We had really good conversations together, brainstormed on a lot of issues and concerns and questions that they had, and very, very productive meetings and very collaborative. So we're really happy with the outcome. Overall, we were able to negotiate this contract and bring forward a tentative agreement to you for your consideration within the board parameters. So we're also very pleased about that as well. Jennifer, you want to go over the financial piece?
Sure. So year one total package is a increase of 5.5% toward all single health insurance plans. Also increasing the stipends for bus supervision and patrol to match what others in the district performing the exact same duties are receiving. Also, we looked at some longevity increases and a wage increase of 2.17%. And then the year 2 package, they did agree to omit the traditional 100 plan, which we've been working toward with all of our groups to improve our chances at getting a more favorable health insurance bid, and then a wage increase of 1.75%. And using that MSBA formula, that came to a 2-year package of 5.02%.
Are we using the MSBA, but what is the regular increase that we've used before?
So it would be a 3.45% in year 1 and a 3.04% in year 2 for a 6.49%.
What was budgeted?
We had budgeted this year of a 3.59 and we settled at 3.45. We don't have a budget for next year.
Okay. Do you think this will be within budget?
Well, we budgeted 3.59 and this was 3.45. So yes.
But we don't know the second year.
No. But with a wage increase of 1.75% in year 2, we believe that to be very favorable going into negotiations with other groups for next year.
Are there any other questions? This agreement seems in line with the recent agreements that we have been approving. We appreciate all the efforts of Nicole and Jennifer. They've had lots of conversations with a number of groups to bring in these agreements at the levels that the board has indicated to them. We were hoping to be able to approve. Are there any further discussions? All right, hearing none, Mr. Clerk, would you please do a roll call on this item?
Okay, let's see. Yvette.
Aye.
Tom.
Aye.
Chad.
Aye.
Andrea.
Aye.
Myself, no. Jason.
Aye.
It passes 5-1.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both. All right. This brings us to item 11, other items of information, at which time I get to turn to our esteemed student representative and give him his moment in the sun, if he so chooses.
All right. I just have a few things. So obviously winter sports have started. Boys basketball is 2-0. Girls basketball is 1-2. The Emeralds last Monday at their community performance raised over $1,000 and over 840 pounds of food for St. Vincent de Paul Food Shell. This past Saturday at their Eastville invite, they placed 3rd in kick and 5th in jazz. Girls hockey is 3-0. Boys hockey is 2-1. And the Faribault High School Student Council has started their annual fundraiser for Toys for Tots. They hope to reach $10,000. I think they're around 5 right now before adding some stuff up, but we have more fundraisers coming up.
Excellent. All right, thank you, Kevin.
Is there a robotics program starting up?
Yeah.
There is.
Yeah. I mean, there's other activities that have started up. They just haven't competed yet. So, yeah.
For those who don't know, Kevin is on the robotics team. Both have that privilege. All right, this brings us to item B, items of information from school board members.
Mr. Chair,
You're up.
that I was to the delegate assembly December 1st, which we voted on a lot of resolutions. in fact, was really favorable. A lot of resolutions on the special ed formula. You know, the proper funding for that. So, and that when it was like 106 to 4, you know, so it was, you know, pretty much everybody agreed. Also, I think that Tom would be interested. The vote was pretty much the same, 106 to 4, on funding more for social workers and counselors.
Excellent.
They gave a throughout the states, you know, what our ratio is, or the state. So, but other than that, it was pretty good. You know, assembly, or what do you want to call it? But it has been an honor for 12 years to represent this district there. We got all that long-term financing.
That was a big one. Yep, you're darn right.
That's a big one for that. So, but yeah, it's been an honor to serve the district for 12 years.
I was just gonna say, Richard, thank you for going to that. Thank you for wearing a Falcon shirt, first time in 4 years, I think, that you would have darn good.
It keeps track.
And,
Of
course, yeah. And I just want to thank Andrea and Richard, and I call him Mr. Casper because he was my teacher. So, and you know, once you've had a teacher, it's really hard to get away from the Mr. and Mrs. So, but I just want to thank all three of you for your service, and we've had great conversation, and hopefully we continue to move the district forward. But thank you to all three of you for your mentorship and working together and whatnot. So.
Mr. Chair, I would also just like to acknowledge and give thanks to Tom and Richard. They've been on the board the whole time I've been on it, so they've been mentors. It's been a learning curve to be on a school board, and I've appreciated your wisdom, advice, debates, arguments, all of it. It was really productive, I think, for our school district overall. So I want to thank you, and I especially want to thank Andrea for sitting next to me. And I'm going to miss her, so I wish her well.
I have a question and then a short statement. Is the organizational meeting in January a public meeting?
Yes.
Yes, as always.
Will there be a community comments section on the agenda?
I would assume there will be.
I'll look on the last one, if you give me a second.
Well, while Mr. Sesker is looking, I'd like to express my thanks to my fellow board members and to the community of Faribault for the honor of representing them, and as we have worked to improve the schools and the school experience here in Faribault. We've had our ups, we've had our downs. I'm sort of glad I'm not going to be here next spring, but all in all, it's been a great experience, so thank Faribault, thank fellow board members.
And I'll just repeat the sentiments. Just thanks everybody I've learned a lot from each one of you. I thank Tom and Richard for serving as long as you have. And I'm excited for the new candidates coming in, board members coming in. This is great. I think it's always good when we get new people on a board, new minds and ideas, and just representing maybe a different group of people who voted for you. So I'm just excited for everybody and wish everybody luck.
Thank you, Andrea. I'll just echo some of the statements that were just made. We have three amazing people who will be joining us in January on the school board. I know each of them, and I'm very excited to work with all three of them. But at this moment, I just want to thank the three of you for whom this is your last night with the board. Andrea, we've known each other since our kids were all at Jefferson together. And ever since I've known you, you've been such a strong advocate for all the students of this district and for the students of your school. And I appreciate all that you've done, and I know you're not done.
No, I'm not.
I'm certain we'll be seeing each other around our kids and activities together, if nothing else, but I just know you're going to be a passionate supporter of our students for a long time to come. Tom, 8 years on the board together, I feel like you have been the conscience of this board at so many moments, and I just appreciate that and how much you have always wanted to make sure that you brought a voice of conscience and a voice of reason to the important tasks that are in front of us, and making sure we're always thinking about the students, and I appreciate that very much. And Richard, 12 years on the board, that is a remarkable service to this community, and you and I have served many of those we have not always agreed. But one thing I will tell you that I say to everyone when I talk about you is how I know for sure that in all your decisions, you are absolutely committed to doing what's best for our kids. Whether or not we agree on what that is, I know that's what is forefront of your mind, and I appreciate all the service you've given this community for 12 years. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
So those are my school board member comments. Are there any other comments from the school board?
Todd, did you find an answer to my question?
I did. There's no, according to the agendas that we've had in the past, there is no community comment at the organizational meeting.
All right, so the next business meeting would be my first opportunity to harass the members.
3-minute limit.
Come on back.
You take your name plank there and just bring it, but, cross out board member.
Do we need a large red clock that counts down for 3 minutes now at all board meetings for the
I
future?
would recommend it.
Thank you, Tom.
Can I?
Yes, please.
Yeah, with robotics, don't let it die through any budget cuts. Do not. That's a great program, and it's gonna grow. He's been state and national, maybe world, who knows? But don't let that die. That's really important.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you. We'll do our best, I promise. Kevin's on top of it. All right, any other comments from the board? Hearing none, Superintendent Sesker.
Okay, it's my turn. Rather than going through all my pile of meetings, I just want to recognize the 3 board members up here and just let all 3 of you know that I've really appreciated the time with you. Andre, our phone calls going back and forth with some of the issues that we have. I've always appreciated your honesty and say, hey, Todd, this is happening. Can you go investigate that? And really, whenever I talk to board members, new board members or others, I use you as an example of how that process works, and you work great at that. Tom, we've had some great discussions. Our lunch when you were the board chair for the couple of years, through your leadership, you guided this district very well, and I appreciate that. We actually agree on 90% of the things that we talk about. And those were always healthy discussions for me because it was nice to talk about MCA scores and standardized testing and things like that I don't necessarily like. And then Richard, of course, you've been here for 8 years with me all the way through the whole process. You've been a great leader. As you said, for the audience, one of the delegate assembly proposals that Richard brought up was this long-term facilities maintenance deal. Previously, we were getting about, $500,000 for facilities to help maintain, and we're just getting further and further and further behind. And through Richard's leadership, we now get about $1.5 million of that for our revenues, and it's really helped substantially. We still have a lot of catching up to do, but it really has gone a long ways, and I really appreciate your representative, the way you represent Faribault up at the delegate assembly. So thank you all for your service. I appreciate it. I did ask the cabinet to say something, but I know Anne-Marie, your spokesperson, went home sick, so I don't know who was delegated that, and you certainly don't have to, but you're certainly welcome to, because I know they wanted to say thanks to you guys as well.
At the microphone, please.
Anne-Marie really was the designated spokesperson. She was.
You're fine. You're fine.
They thank you. I know I've talked to them, and we've talked very positively how strong our school board has been over the years. We're looking forward to the 3 new strong board members too. It really has been a great group. And what makes this so great is the diversity within this board. The different views, the different opinions. You're not always voting 100% every time. You're expressing your opinions, and that's what makes a board healthy. And then we all walk out of here every single time shaking hands or talking to each other and never holding a grudge. So really appreciate that.
Thank you, Todd. With that, last thing on the agenda is that some dates to remember. And for this one, Monday, January 7th at 5:30 p.m. is when we will welcome our new board members at our organizational meeting, which will take place right here in the district office. And with that, we are on item 13, adjournment. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. We are adjourned.